Greetings, this is Astrology 202, reading a birth chart, and I'm your host Seth Roback. We are going to discuss the anatomy of a birth chart, talk about birth information, the sun, moon, and rising signs, the elements and modes, as well as the planetary aspects and the birth wheel. Let's look at the anatomy of a birth chart. There's the birth info, the birth wheel, which has all the positions of the planets and their aspects to each other, and the zodiac and house system. Then we have the planets, the signs, and the degrees of which they occupy within those signs. You have the elements and modes, which planets are in what particular element or mode. And then we have the planetary aspect grid. So let's talk about birth information. That includes the name, the date, the city, state or province and country, the longitude and latitude, the time at which the person is born. So we have the sun, moon, and rising sign. And there's a Scorpio sun, which is self-realization and self-expression that comes through a transformative, regenerative type of experiences, and identifies with sex, death, and survival instincts. Then he has the Aries moon that seeks lots of challenges in personal life, and his emotions are expressed with great vigor. And then there's the Ascendant that's on the cusp of Scorpio and Sagittarius, and or the rising sign. It has to do with day-to-day experiences involving seeking truth and wisdom, as well as transformation and secrecy. So I always think of Scorpio and Sagittarius being there as some kind of mystical experience. Let's discuss elements and modes. First thing I want to do is describe how I rate or weight all of the planetary elements. So here I circled, this is Harvey's grid that shows what element he is and what modes his planets occupy. So I circled here the moon, the ascendant, and the sun, and give that the heaviest weight of 3, because those are the big 3 that describe the person in their chart. And assign a weight of 2 to Mars, Mercury, and Venus, and a weight of 1 to Jupiter and Saturn as they get farther away from, the slower moving planets. And then all the rest, which is, Chiron, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, I don't give them any weight at all, just because they're so slow moving. So anyways, let's look at his fire elements. Fire is about risk-taking, initiative, leadership, and skills. And adding up all his weights here, from left to right, I put the +3, +2, and so on. It equals 12 is the total. And there's what fire is like. It's this kind of radiant, vital energy. Now we'll discuss air, and I only have a rating of 1 for all his air signs. And air has to do with intellect and communication and freedom, liberation. Then we have earth, which is sensuality, common sense, and practical skills. Again, kind of a low rating of 1. There you feel of this earth. And then water is a little higher with the +3, there. So, and that has to do with sensitivity, intuition, and emotional intelligence. And so, there you have the water element. So his dominant element is fire. So he is a born dynamo. Wow, pretty impressive. Okay, let's talk about the modes. First, starting with Cardinal. That has to do with the beginning of the season. And, all the signs that are at the beginning, the Aries and Cancer and Libra and Capricorn. So because of the beginning of the season, it's when people with a lot of cardinal signs initiate change. And I think of, someone like Martin Luther King who instigated a change in awareness. And then the fixed signs are in the middle of the season, and their focus is consistency. And Harvey has a rating of 6 there. And so I think of, the Mount Rushmore monuments, how that's set in stone, that's something that's not going to change right away. Okay, and then the mutable represent the end of the season, the signs at the end of the season, and is passive and adaptable, and that has a rating of 7. So, being flexible, being able to, respond to the environment. So fixed and mutable are fairly close, 4 and 6. Cardinal is the weakest. 6 and 7. Cardinal is the weakest, but not very low. Harvey has a kind of a well-balanced personality. He is an initiator of change. He is consistent and adaptable. So let's look at the life lessons that are described through the lunar, north, and south node. Harvey's lunar node is in Sagittarius, the sign of winter migration in the first house. His south node is in Gemini, the birth in spring in the 7th house, so new life in springtime. Kind of that fascination and wonder. So that's where his south node is. So looking at his south node, this is the lessons, this is what he's already mastered but needs to move away from, and that's where he's coming from, basically. And that's the south node, where it shows now, because he's going away from this influence. He gets, before he kind of was a master of logic and, was very focused in on relationships, but now it's tripping him up, having to have explanation for everything. Also, he gets caught up in relationships. So, it made me think of the hangman, who's kind of tangled up there. And then for his north node, Harvey is learning to be free to travel, study, and expand his worldview. So because the north node's in Sagittarius, which is expansive and traveling, and it's in his first house, which is about his own self-determination. So he needs to go out there on his own, and do his thing, and not have to really check in with someone else. Eventually. It's not like he can't ever have a relationship or anything, but it's important that he makes himself a priority. So let's talk about Saturn, what you use to measure your success. So the 2 Saturn returns divide up an average human lifespan into a beginning, middle, and end. So looking at this diagram, you can kind of see, where the middle age is and where the, the end and the beginning. The beginning, you're just kind of learning and developing, and then you have your first Saturn return around age 28, and then between your first and second Saturn return, from age 28 to 56 is kind of when you do your life's work. You kind of put your your roots in the ground. And then, age 56, around that time, nowadays people retire in their mid-60s or whatever. But, it's sort of when you're winding down and passing on your legacy to the next generation. So that's what this chart signifies. So the sign and house that Saturn occupies defines your life's work. It defines what you learn, what you're supposed to develop, what skills in the first section. In the middle section, the work you're supposed to do in the world. And in the third section, what you're going to pass down, what knowledge, what wisdom you've obtained. So in Harvey's case, Harvey's Saturn is in Libra in the 11th house. Libra has to do with balance and relationships, and the 11th house is social networking. So he measures his success by his relationships, both personal and in his community. So let's talk about planetary aspects. So the first set of planets are your inner planets. They're fast moving and they define your traits as an individual. So that's Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars that I have, isolated there. And then the outer planets are slow moving and describe circumstances and generational influence, societal influences. And that's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And then we have the Ascendant and Midheaven, which are the angles representing the Earth rotating. And that's very fast moving. And that describes your physical traits and day-to-day behaviors. So looking at one of the grids there, like a Venus and Mars, for example, with Harvey, is a square. This is what it looks like, a square, which is a hard aspect and an affliction. And the top number is the degrees of orbit. The lesser the degrees, the stronger the aspect. So 0 to 3 degrees is very strong, 3 to 6 degrees is strong, and 6 to 10 degrees is fairly weak. So this is kind of a weak square, is what I would call it. Let's discuss planetary aspects. There's hard aspects, which represent tension that creates learning experiences. And the first one is a square, which is 90 degrees separation, which describes conflict, struggle, and passion. And then there's the opposition, which is 180 degrees, that describes duality, tension, and growth. Then there's the soft aspects that are easy and successful attributes. And there's the trine that's 120 degrees that describes natural talent and can make you complacent because it's something that comes easy to you. And then the sextile that's 60 degrees, it's a fertile opportunity. But, maybe indolence or some sort of, taking it for granted. Then you have the conjunction, which is 0 to 6 degrees and is a fusion of the planets. And, wherever there's a conjunction with Mars and Saturn makes it more harder aspect, meaning more challenge. Venus and Jupiter makes it, because those are lucky planets, makes the aspect easier and softer. So, anyways. So let's look at the planetary aspects some more about that. The inner planets aspecting each other represent your unique strengths and challenges. So the grid, this top part of the grid of Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars shows how they aspect each other, and those are quick moving planets. So they describe you as an individual. And so, you can see the harder aspects are the red ones in red, and the softer ones are in blue, showing, and I like this strength card because it shows overcoming, an obstacle with gentleness. So it's both hard and soft, being able to tame this lion. So the outer planets aspecting inner planets is this green square. You see where that is on the grid. And it shows environmental benefits and challenges to your personality. So it made me think of the Wheel of Fortune, that we have good fortune, fortune goes up, fortunes go up and down, and the lesson in the Wheel of Fortune is to find the center, to become centered in yourself so that you're not swayed by the ups and downs of life. And that's where you see, the inner planets aspecting with the outer planets. So, if you look in the grid, there's the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and all the aspects are within that square to the external influences of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And then you have this section of the grid that's I drew in gray, that are they're the outer planets aspecting each other. And because they're so slow moving, I call them the sign of the times, generational influences on the masses. And the closest thing I could see to that in the tarot deck was judgment, something that affects everyone, the masses of people, like some rebirth or artistic movement that goes across the globe, or an invention that changes everything, like electricity or automobiles or whatever, that sort of thing. And then you see in this blue square are the aspects to your angles at your ascendant and midheaven. And so, but that includes also the descendant in the coli. So if it's conjunct to either the ascendant or midheaven, it means that planet is right next to those. And if it's opposition, it means they're basically conjunct the opposite. So there's an opposition here with Uranus in the midheaven. So really that Uranus is conjunct the coeli, which has to do with, home and family and that sort of thing. So anyways, because these are so quick moving, the angles, they really describe your earthly terrestrial existence. But then it brings in the, external influences, like in this case Uranus, from far away into your daily life. And I think of as above, so below, like the Magician card. So looking for the strongest aspects is something that I always try to do in a chart, because there's too much data to look at in a chart, and you have to find out which data is the most pertinent when you're doing a reading. So one, I exclude aspects between outer planets with outer planets. Well, actually I say I exclude the North Node, but I'm including the North Node now. So then I look at conjunctions between the Sun, Moon, and Rising, but I ignore the conjunctions between Sun, Mercury, and Venus, because they're always clumped together. So conjunctions with Sun, Moon, and Rising, because they identify you so much as an individual and a person, anything conjunct those is going to be significant. Also aspects with the tightest orbs, preferably 0 to 3 degrees. So Harvey has this real strong opposition with Mars and Neptune. And then you look at the personal planets with the most squares, which is Mars. And then a personal planet with the most trines, which is the Moon. And then a singleton planet with no aspects, which is the Sun here. That stands out. So we'll look at Moon conjunction, Harvey's aspects, Moon conjunct Uranus. So his personal life is really is very independent, innovative, and free. And when I showed Harvey this picture, he wouldn't let me switch slides. He wanted to look at this picture so much. He just loves this idea of the house being suspended in the air by balloons, you know. So I think this was the right symbol. Yeah, he probably will move and live in different places, maybe around the world, you know, being a Sag ascendant. And then Harvey's aspect, Ascendant conjunct Mercury and Venus. Both Mercury and Venus, as you see on the right here, are in 6 degrees, right next to the Ascendant. So in this case, I look at the Mercury representing intellect that boosts charm and beauty. You know, the Venus is attraction, and you know, Mercury is being very clever. So I see a lot of charm here. Harvey's aspects, Mars opposition Neptune is a real strong one in his chart, and you can see that in the zodiac wheel. And Mars at 0 degrees opposition to Neptune struggle with passivity and aggression, and he might have a persecution complex. Usually when people see the Ten of Swords, they freak out. They're like, you know, it's so gruesome and horrible. But, you know, if you notice it, it's over the top. So it's, you know, when I read the LearnTarot.com definition of this, is that it's melodrama. And boy, that fits him so much. You know, he's just 2.5 years old, but boy, he can make the littlest thing like this operatic moment, you know, just anything, like, you know, the captain screw on right on a bottle or something, and it just becomes this huge deal. So anyways, that's something he's going to have to learn, is that he's, you know, not helpless, he's not being persecuted, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, Neptune kind of oftentimes feels very receptive to the rest of the world and vulnerable. So anyways, it's funny. So Harvey's strongest aspects has to do with his trines to the moon. So basically his moon has a trine with Mercury and Venus that are conjunct each other. And so this is comforting and nurturing, comes easily, but it comes too easily. You know, if you get everything you want right away, it's hard to appreciate the things you get. You know, moon is comfort, and Venus is pleasure, and, you know, Mercury's natural talent. So, you know, here's this guy, he's sitting and looking at these 3 cups, and, you know, he's just getting stuff out of thin air, but he doesn't look that overjoyed by it. That's the problem when that happens. So Harvey's strongest aspects are his squares on Mars, which again, it's just as Mars squared this Mercury and Venus, and it's not a real strong square because, and if you notice here, Mars is in Leo in 28 degrees. So it's towards the end of Leo, and really the sign that squares Sagittarius would be Virgo. So it's kind of, that's called a hidden square. And so the struggle might not be real evident, but it's a loose square. So I mean, it's a weaker square, so it's not too hard on him. But it shows that he has a lot of passion. You know, Mars thrives in a square. You know, Mars is about facing challenges and being courageous. That sometimes he may get a little over his head. You know, he's always pushing himself, and that's kind of like this 7 of Wands card. You know, he's like the king of the mountain, but he's got to fight off all these other contenders. So that. Okay, a summary of Harvey's strongest aspects. Oh, right. So then there's also Sun, which is a singleton, meaning it had no aspects to any of the other planets. So it stands alone by itself, makes it very significant. So, but it's Sun in Scorpio in the 12th house. So there's a focus on self-realization, and in the 12th house of spirituality and intuition, as well as Scorpio of regeneration. So I think of him as being, his identity is very much in being kind of a spiritual retreat. That's very important for him. Probably will need to be out in nature to regenerate. So then now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the distribution of planetary energy in each of the hemispheres of the birth wheel. So we'll start with the eastern half of the birth wheel, which is all about self-determination. So here I add up the numbers by planetary weights, and it comes out to unit of 8 to the east. And so here's the picture of the guy who's doing it. He's taking the chance, and it's about what he wills. So then we go to the western half of the birth wheel, and that has to do with relationships. So we add that one up, and it equals 6. So it's less than the east. So maybe and Harvey in his chart is supposed to kind of move away a little bit from the relationship and be into more what he can accomplish on his own. I mean, it's not to say he can't have one, but more weight is placed on the other hemisphere. Then we look at the above hemisphere, and add those up, and that has to do with career, and it's a weight of 6. We look at his personal life, the lower half of the birth wheel, and add those numbers up, and it's an 8 here. And one of these awkward family photos. They're pretty funny. But anyways, that has to do with home and family. So that's actually has a heavier weight than his career. So, that'll be an important thing for him. But not by much. So generally, he's well balanced. He has, not too much difference between the planets in the east and the west, above or below. The only thing I really see is that his 7th, 8th, or his 6th, 7th, 8th, and 10th houses are kind of empty. He has more going on in the 1st, the 12th, so wherever there's a cluster, or where the planets are, shows that there's more emphasis there. So, anyways, he has his dominant planet through all those criteria we talked about before is Mars. So if you look at Mars in the chart, it's kind of out there by itself. Which is called an outlier. An outlier that is a maverick from the other planets. This makes it a significant planet because all the other planets are kind of over on one side, and then you have this one planet that's out there. So Mars also has a bunch of hard aspects, which also makes it stand out. It has that opposition to Neptune and the squares to Mercury and Venus. And so this really makes Harvey a Mars person. He'll have the attributes of a Mars warrior. So he's very much about action and challenge, and his north node's in the 1st house of self-determination. All of those things, become well represented by Conan the Barbarian. But if you look at it, Mars is in the 9th house of cultural values and travel and higher education, philosophy. So, you know, where does he apply this assertive energy, this kind of, you know, fearless energy, aggressive? And he's likely to challenge the cultural ideals around him. You know, the way you think of Socrates, who was forced to drink hemlock, you know, because of his ideas. So Harvey's, you know, he's more likely going to push the boundaries there. It may make some people upset. We'll see. I know I do. So, like father, like son. So here are my final thoughts. Harvey has an abundance of planetary energy in the fire signs. Holy guacamole. Sun is pronounced as a singleton and Mars is an outlier in most squared, giving him a daring and expressive personality. So, you know, he's going to leave a trail of fire where he goes. But he has close ties to home and family. But his home is a place for independence and creativity. He will not play conventional roles. So, you know, there's a lot of weight in his personal life. So, but he needs diversity, and I think of art, you know, sort of some creative freedom. So another thing is Sun is in the 12th house, and Mars is opposition to Neptune. So both of those things can make it challenging to be in the public and express himself. He is introverted and may feel very sensitive around others. You know, he's likely to have shy tendencies or to feel kind of trapped in that way. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It means, you know, he has a lot of inner resources that he can draw upon, and it's just a little more of a challenge to interface with other people, you know, in the society at large. But then again, his life's work is to, you know, to network. Remember, we said Saturn was in the 11th house in Libra, so, you know, he measures his success by how well he does spread out his social network. So, you know, it's a challenge that he'll have to work through. So here he is, Harvey Sofian Roback, the super cutie. And here he is running in the Oregon coast. And thank you very much for watching.